We have a very special guest alert because on today's show, we are bringing on PFF's lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema, who's going to tell us why he doesn't think the Chargers should necessarily trade back from 5 and answering all of our other biggest draft questions.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, and my co-host, David Drogemeyer, will be joining me shortly, but we've been covering the Chargers for 8 seasons together, and this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from, especially so you don't miss big-time guests like the one we have on today's show, one of the best in the business, telling us why he doesn't think the Chargers should trade back, what we could expect from Marvin Harrison Jr. in year 1 if he does end up on the Chargers, and also how much the Chargers should expect to get back if they decide to trade back into the double digits in this draft. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Here he is, Trevor Sikkema. All right, guys, we have maybe the biggest draft guest that we've ever had on the show today. Super excited to be talking with Trevor Sikkema from PFF. And we were talking about before the show, me and David have been with Locked On so long that when we started, Trevor Sikkema, who's now the PFF lead draft analyst and the co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, which is one of the more unique and great NFL shows out there, he was the host of the Locked On NFL Draft when we started with Locked On. That's how long he's been around, so he's getting back to his roots. But make sure you guys also head over to PFF's mock draft simulator at pff.com/mock, because it is the best mock draft simulator that there is right now. And I think the special thing about it is the customization of it, right? You can get exactly what you want out of it. If you want it to be more by, big board kind of guidelines, if you want it to be more customized by what PFF has on their big board, you can do whatever you want there. And you can also earn rewards, make trades, and select the prospects of the future of the NFL. Be sure to head over to pff.com/mock. Trevor, back to your roots, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Guys, it's always great to be back on the Locked On Network. I appreciate you guys having me on the show. Excited to talk a little Chargers, a little NFL draft with you guys, and also appreciate the kind words about the mock draft simulator. We try to take a lot of pride in allowing it to kind of be whatever you want the experience to be. If you want to change up the order, you can do that. If you want randomness, you can do that. If you want more what we think the consensus is going to be, you can do. Appreciate y'all saying the kind words about the mock draft simulator. Something that I've spent way too much time on over the last 3 months.
Oh, man, I bet. But, I mean, that thing has come such a long way, and it is the go-to now, right? Like, that is, in 2024, the year of our Lord, that is the mock draft simulator you want to use. But with the Chargers, man, we've asked all the draft experts the same thing, because it's such a pivotal spot where they're at 5 right now, right? And it's such a big decision that they're likely going to have to make. Maybe it gets made for them. But it's this. You either take a blue chip, top elite wide receiver prospect, right? Or you trade back and get more draft capital on a roster that I know you've talked about before. Hey, this roster has a lot of holes in it too. So the team has a lot of glaring needs, but where do you fall on the take a receiver versus trade back debate?
Man, you go back and forth and you see, I think that there's a lot of really good options here for this team. It's hard for me to pass on the receiver. It really is. For as much as this team has a lot of holes, and, me personally, when I look at it, I think I'd be taking one of the wide receivers here at the very top. There are a couple of very alluring trades, like obviously Minnesota trading you 11 and 23 gets really interesting for you because it allows you to hit a couple of different needs you would expect. Like you could draft CB1 at 11 maybe, right? And you can get that top CB there. This draft is deep enough at offensive tackle to where you could probably get a dang good offensive tackle as well. If you wanted them at 23, you could get a great wide receiver at 23 as well. You might be able to get a Brian Thomas Jr. and A.D. Mitchell, something like that as well in the first round. So it's alluring, but there's no doubt about it. Anytime you trade back, the bullseye on the dartboard gets a little bit smaller, right? Yeah. No matter how you see it, no matter how talented a draft class is. So it's hard for me to say that they should pass on a guy that you just really feel confident about that's going to heavily impact the team. Now, obviously, that's what I would do. Yeah. But I do think there is something to what Jim Harbaugh wants to do with this team to build through the trenches. I don't know if that means that they're going to take an offensive lineman at number 5 or not. But I think it's more on the table than a lot of people realize that it is. I think that it's a genuine debate. And when you look at what he did at Stanford, the offensive lines that he had at Stanford in front of Andrew Luck, when you look at how he built a 49ers and just how good that team was in both of the trenches, what he did at Michigan, how it took a while for them to get to the identity that he wanted that team to be. But the last 2 years, you could say that it was pretty on point, and he was dominating in both of the trenches on both of those teams. You know he's going to want to continue to do that in the NFL. Doesn't necessarily mean that has to happen at number 5 overall, but these are genuine conversations that I think, for as much as Chargers fans might just say, no, wide receiver is way too bad right now, they cannot go anywhere else. I just don't think it's that cut and dry. I think that offensive line is on the table one way or another, whether it's a 5 or maybe it's trade back and get an offensive lineman. Who knows?
Yeah, speaking of trades, obviously there's a lot of trade talk going on. If the Vikings end up trading up with the Cardinals instead of the Chargers, there's a chance that they land star receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., as you happened in your 7th-round mock draft on PFF. That would be great for LA after losing Mike Williams and trading Keenan Allen. But do you think he has the potential to come in and be their wide receiver 1 as a rookie?
Oh, no question about it. I really do. Like, I think, knock on wood, full health. Obviously, I want him to never get hurt, and I want to see as many games as we possibly can of Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, this is a 1,000-yard receiver his rookie year. Like, genuinely. I mean, I think it's pretty easy for me to assume that, especially with Justin Herbert throwing in the football. He's the immediate target getter on that team. Jim Harbaugh knows him very well. Obviously, the last 2 years, he had over 100 yards and at least 1 touchdown in both of those games. And one of those games was against future first-round corner Will Johnson. So it's not like Jim Harbaugh is going to need to, get to know Marvin Harrison Jr. He knows him really well, game planning for him. And even game planning for him, they knew they couldn't really stop him when he was going up against Ohio State. So I just think that he is such a phenomenal prospect. The mastery of the position right off the bat is going to stand out, I think, even in his rookie year, because when you talk about guys that can really hit the ground running, that's really what it's about. Do you understand how to win at the position when the competition is going to get even better? And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely is that, whether it's his releases or how he tempos his routes, how he attacks different types of leverages, winning with athleticism as well, winning with body control, winning with footwork. Like, he just does all of this stuff. He does all of it at such a very high level. So to me, if you have the chance to take him at 5, I think you take him at 5, and I think he'll be a future All-Pro with Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I know Matt Williamson too. Our Peacock and Williamson show had the sentiment when we did the Locked On NFL mock draft where he's like, can Jim Harbaugh make his first pick as the Chargers head coach a Buckeye? Like, does he have it in him? Can Joe Ortiz kind of override him there? But at the same time, if anyone knows how good that dude is, and one of the best defenses in the country, and Marvin Harrison Jr. still torched him both times he went up against him. But it is interesting because you will have a chance at a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Malik Neighbors or a Roma Dunze, and I don't think you could go wrong with any of those picks. And for me, it's like, hey, with the wide receiver core right now, you need to come away from the first round with a blue chip offensive skill player. Like, that's just, I think, bottom line what it has to be, especially because you probably won't be picking this high. Maybe never again, right? In the Jim Harbaugh era.
You don't want to.
Exactly.
Right?
You're hoping to never get close to this, right? So when will you have this chance? Which puts kind of such a premium on if they trade back, right? And especially if they end up trading back with someone who wants a quarterback, right? If J.J. McCarthy or a Drake May or someone like that falls to pick 5, then the phones start ringing. My question is this: assuming you're trading back to the double digits, because I could probably get behind, maybe you trade back with the Bears or someone like that where you still potentially have a chance at a Neighbors or in a Dunze or something like that. But if you're moving into the double digits, how much of a premium should you put on that, right? How much should you be asking for back? Should it be, if it's the Vikings, 11, 23, and a future first, right? Like, what should they be kind of leveraging that into? What should be kind of the bare minimum price that they get back if they want to trade back into the teens? Or the
yeah, obviously it all depends exactly where they're going, but it's probably, 2 first-round picks at the very least, and then you kind of talk about what you're going to sprinkle on top. I don't think they're going to get 3 first-round picks out of it unless it's like Denver at 12 and Denver wants to give you their first rounder this year, their first rounder next year, and their first rounder in 2026. Because you got to remember this too. Like, the further out we get, I'll say less valuable, and I put those in air quotes, like those picks get, which is why the Vikings trade is so strong, because this is a really talented draft class. So the Vikings can basically say, okay, we're giving you 2 first rounders in a draft class that is right in front of you, that is very good. There's not this, next year's class doesn't look nearly as good. Oh, wow, the year after that doesn't look so good. this is a good draft class right now, premium talent at premium positions. And the Vikings are probably going to say, we'll give you 11 and 23 and maybe like a fourth next year. Like I just,
Sure.
I could be totally wrong because when it comes to quarterbacks, like Lord knows what the value is going to be. Some teams get super desperate for this stuff. Well, I mean, we watched the 49ers trade 3 first-round picks just to get QB3 and Trey Lance, right? Yeah. So I think that factors into it too, is that you're trading up for QB4 in this draft class. And
we have more great stuff to get into with Trevor Sikkema, including if Joe Alt can play on the right side of the Chargers, do go that direction, and who he thinks the best defender in this draft is, all on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about FanDuel, because FanDuel is the only place you should be placing your bet. And right now, it's playoff time in the NBA, NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, it really is the best time because not only are the playoffs going on, right, but FanDuel has one of the best promotions they have going of the entire year, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That means all this playoff action going on, and you can have some house money to play with. $150 win or lose in bonus bets. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. And there are a bunch of great sports going on right now. So if you want to get in on the NBA playoff action with the Lakers playing against the Nuggets, you can go with LeBron, total points, rebounds, and assists, and so many other great bets. And if you want to bet on football, you can still do that, because you can already bet for the Chargers right now to go win the Super Bowl if you wanted to. So if you want to get on any of that action or bet on any of the playoff action going on right now, there's only one place to do it. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I also need to tell you guys about Monopoly Go, because I need you guys to listen up to this huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all of my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce that I'm finally on top. That's right, obviously I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, including by me and my wife. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. So if you want to get that Monopoly fix, you can do it anywhere with Monopoly Go, and you can explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on your iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or you can go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's the Monopoly tycoon, and sometimes even better yet, who's gone bankrupt. So go get yourself on the charts, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play.
That I don't weigh as much, because the Vikings might think J.J. McCarthy is QB2 in this class. And if they get him as QB4, they don't really care. It doesn't really matter. But I just don't think, like, Cardinals fans are I've talked with Cardinals fans about this before, and they're like, oh, if you're the Cardinals, you're not taking anything other than, like, for less than 3 first-round picks. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't know if, like, for the Vikings is the example that they give. And it's like, I don't think the Vikings are going to be comfortable giving you more than 11 and 23. Like, I think.
Sure.
And if you go into next year, the Vikings also, here's the thing, like, don't have a second round pick.
Because they used it to get another first this year, right? Yeah.
Right. And so you can't ask for another first from Minnesota, because then they're not picking until the 3rd round next year. Their first rounder is basically untouchable at this point. So any Chargers or Cardinals fan that's kind of saying, we want 3 first rounders to move back, you're not going to get it from Minnesota. So then you would have to get it from Denver. And now you're talking about picks in 2026. Yeah. So how valuable is that to you? So these are all the conversations that you have when you talk about trading down. But to go back to the original question, I think it's going to be 2 firsts, no matter what. Like, it's obviously going to be your first round pick next year, and then it's going to be something worth first round pick value, either 2025 for most teams, or if you're the Vikings, that other pick here in 2024. And then you can sprinkle on kind of whatever it is to sweeten the deal, if you will. Maybe it's a day 2 pick. Maybe it's a couple of day 3 picks, whatever it ends up being. But that's what I think the price tag is going to be.
Well, although much of the Chargers fan base definitely wants them to pick a receiver at 5, But with Jim Harbaugh in charge, there's a very good chance that building through the trenches and taking Joe Alt at 5 might be something that they want to do if they can't find that trade partner. How concerned would you be about his ability to switch sides if they did make that pick, considering they have a former All-Pro and Rashawn Slater on the left side?
Yeah, obviously it's a great question, and unfortunately, it's one that I can't answer. I've talked to offensive linemen before, and like some of them have switched from left to right, and they've been able to do it seamlessly. Like it's just amount of reps. Like that's all it is. It's like, okay, I'm starting my kick slides with my other foot. Okay, well now I'm normally punching with my other hand, and it's repetition that you have to get. And some guys simply pick it up faster than others. It's like people in soccer who can kick with both legs, right? Or people who can throw with both hands, right? Some people are more ambidextrous than others when it comes to switching from how coordinated you are with your right and the left side of your body. So unfortunately, I can't really answer that question. The only ones who can are the ones who have been able to put him through drills, working him on the right side of the line of scrimmage and seeing how natural he might look or seeing how awkward he might look. So it's just something that goes into the evaluation. You'd have to talk to, the people at Notre Dame. You'd have to talk to their offensive line coaches. At his pro day, I'm sure that a lot of offensive line coaches were like, okay, let's see what you look like at right tackle as well. And, he's probably going through that in his training. You'll ask wherever he's training. I actually haven't looked up where he's training for pre-draft stuff, but like, you're going to ask those people, like, what do they think and how he's been? Have you been working him on the right side of the line of scrimmage? All that kinds of stuff. So it's an important question. Unfortunately, it's just one that I can't answer very well until, you're able to really see it with your own eyes.
And that's the thing, Trevor. No one can, right? But that's the kind of whole point of that is just you have to build that into the evaluation. If you want to use pick 5 on Joe Alt, you have to look at some of the other guys. Like I forget who said it, but some offensive line was like, it's like wiping with your left hand. But like we would never blame a pitcher, right? If we just said, hey, we're actually going to, we like you as a righty, but we really need a lefty in the rotation, right? Let's see what you got there. Like it would never happen. So I think sometimes we think it's a foregone conclusion that just because someone is talented enough, and to me he's the most talented, offensive tackle in this draft, doesn't mean it's always going to translate, and it doesn't mean it's going to translate right away. So you have to build that in, especially, like we said, you're not going to pick at 5 again under Jim Harbaugh, hopefully. Is that who you're going to use the pick on and just, hope that he's going to be a great right tackle, assuming you can't get a trade back, obviously. But if the Chargers do trade back, the defensive side of the ball becomes much more of an option. Like you said, you could go get CB1. So in a draft that might set a record for the number of offensive players that are drafted in the first round, who do you think the best defender in this draft is?
It's a good question. I think that there's a debate, in my opinion, between Cooper DeJean, Laiatu Latu, Jerzon Newton, and Quinyon Mitchell. I think those are the 4 that come to my mind. And there's some other really great defensive players, but those are the ones that I have the highest on my board. I think that Cooper DeJean is 8. I think Quinyon Mitchell is 9. I think Laiatu Latu is 10, and I think Jerzon Newton is 11, or something like that. Like they're all 4 of them are right there for that top defensive player in this class. And I think that there's just a case for all 4 of them to be super high impact players.
Yeah, and obviously with Jim Harbaugh as the head coach of the Chargers, we often joke about how many former Wolverines will be drafted by the Chargers. And obviously with Jesse Minter being there on the defensive side as well. Which of the former Michigan players are you highest on in this draft, and which one do you think the Chargers would like or their fans would love to have them end up with?
That's a good question. Let me pull up my big board really quick and see who's actually the highest. Okay, so
outside of JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, outside of JJ McCarthy, Mike Sanderstill is the next highest player on my board. I have him 34th overall just because I see him very similarly to like Brian Branch last year. And it's funny that I'm doing this in back-to-back years because normally if you are a slot defender, and I am somebody who believes in the importance of the slot defender, right? I mean, like that's a big reason why I'm leaning into this is if you would have asked me 3-4 years ago, whatever it is, like, hey, best slot corner in the draft, to be like, all right, 3rd round grade at the highest, at the absolute highest. And now I'm talking about like late 1st, early 2nd round grade. I had 1st round grade on Brian Branch last year. And it's just because they're such high impact players at a position that matters so much. That's such a unique skill set to be able to defend tight ends and wide receivers and short shifty players and bigger or taller players. Like, man, it's just such a high demand. And you trust the football player that Mike Sanderstill is. So he would be next for me. He is 34 on my list. Roman Wilson comes after that. He's 42. Chris Jenkins is 50. Then Blake Corum is 52. And then Junior Colson is the last one that I have in the top 100. I have him at 71. So those are the Michigan guys that I have in my top 100.
And the nice thing about that is the Chargers have a need at all of those positions, right? We've, consistently mocked Mikey Sainristil in the second round of the Chargers. You have him at 34. That means 37. You're still getting a good value, and you're also filling a giant position of need because a slot corner is a starting position now, and you kind of just have to think about it that way with 4-2-5 defenses everywhere. But we still have some great insight from Trevor Sikkema on this Chargers draft class coming up and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about Game Time, though, because Game Time is the one place that I always get my tickets to any event, because Game Time is the best place to get your tickets because you get the Game Time guarantee, you get the flash deals, and so much more. Plus, Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier than before, and prices on the Game Time app will actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch because they have flash deals, and you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event, which is great news because I'm still trying to plan my first Padres game with little Dylan, and I just know the nice thing is with Game Time, whenever I do get to go, whenever the moment's right, I'm going to be able to find cheaper tickets because I was already looking at the next series against the Phillies. I found tickets for $24. That's something that's not going to break the bank since all my money is going to baby formula right now. Game Time is the best place to get your tickets with the Game Time guarantee, with the flash deals. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. One of the things that we've been most interested in, obviously, since the Jim Harbaugh hiring is just how he's going to build this team, which has been more of a finesse team, into that blue-collar, physical type of team and what it'll look like, right? So is there any player in this draft where you look at them and you say, it'll be very hard for the Chargers to pass up on this guy because he's such a Jim Harbaugh guy? Like, Jim Harbaugh is going to look at this guy and see the physicality and kind of see the meanness and see the toughness, and it's going to be hard for him to pass up because that's a Jim Harbaugh type of player.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and I think it's something that's absolutely worth talking about. You know, again, when we go back to the offensive line, I know people are going to yell at me because they don't want to hear me talk about offensive line, but I genuinely believe that he is going to look at these guys very, very closely. Like a player like J.C. Latham from Alabama, a player like Talise Fuanga from Oregon State. Like, these are road graders. These are maulers. These are third and short situations. We're kicking your ass. We're moving the line of scrimmage 2 yards in front. We're making it a cakewalk for our running back to get this first down here. Like, that's what he wants. So I think those players would definitely be in the Harbaugh wheelhouse, if you will. I think that a guy like Zach Frazier as well. I know Corey Linsley's retiring. And so like Zach Frazier, he's just like such a smart, tough center prospect that I think they could be targeting him at the top of that second round area. So to me, he makes a ton of sense. Then you start getting into like some of these defensive line guys. You know, I wonder, because it's a little bit different, right? He loves the toughness in the trenches. There's no doubt about it. But think of Michigan's defensive line over the past couple of years. Yeah. It's like athletic freaks. Like he goes for like toughness and strength in the offensive trenches. Like, he wants to just play bully ball with you in the offensive trenches. But on the defensive side of the ball, you know, like Mozzie Smith and Chris Jenkins Jr. and even like when Mo Hurst was there and what Braden McGregor was when he was in his last year, and obviously Aiden Hutchinson, and you got David Ojabo, and it's like these are crazy athlete type of players. So to me, I look at maybe some of the interior defensive linemen like Ruka Rororo from Clemson, who might be a bit of a tweener in weight, but he's just this super athlete guy who could play defensive end for you. He could play on the interior a little bit. I think the same with Brandon Dorless from Oregon, who, again, a little bit of a tweener player, but he's just really explosive, really fast with his hand usage. Those are players that I think he's going to gravitate towards. If we go back to offense, Mason McCormick, the South Dakota State guard. I know they're kind of all right at guard with Jamari Sawyer and Zion Johnson, but you know, if you wanted somebody else at that spot, or shoot, maybe if you believe that he could play center, he's somebody who's absolutely going to block you into next week, and he's got that mauling mentality to him. So those are a handful of guys that come to my mind that would be like personality fits for a Jim Harbaugh trench play.
Well, we obviously want the Chargers to go grab a receiver in round 1, but there's a good chance that they might not go in that direction. So if the Chargers do pass on a receiver on day 1, who are your favorite receivers they could target on day 2?
Man, there's a lot. There's just so many. There's just so many different wide receivers that you could go with. Part of me wants to say, like, it kind of depends what Quentin Johnston's going to be, right? Like, do you want him to be a vertical guy, or do you want him to just be a little bit more in his wheelhouse and just have him be yards after the catch type of a player? But if we're being honest, their wide receivers rooms kind of is at the place where you're just going to draft the highest receiver that you have on your board. You're not really like, right. Like I was talking with some friends of mine who have a Carolina Panthers show, and they were talking about like, oh, like, okay, but they need this type of receiver since they already have Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen. It's like, I understand what you're saying. I'm not letting Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson get in the way of me not picking the wide receiver that I have the highest on my board. So that's kind of the way that I look at it with the Chargers. It's tempting to talk about like scheme fits and things like that, but like Brian Thomas Jr. would be an ace for them. I also think that they'd love Troy Franklin just because of the playmaker that he is after the catch. They'd obviously love Roman Wilson. I think they'd love Ladd McConkey in sort of that same light, like two smaller guys who will block their butt off for you. They're slot size, but they can give you more as outside receivers as well. I think, boy, you want to talk about toughness. Two dudes that'll absolutely, I'll say three dudes that'll absolutely bring it for you. Xavier Legette from South Carolina. I mean, just like a crazy athlete if you want that outside X type of receiver. Jalen Polk, who's got some of the best contested catches, some giant hands, really good strength at the catch point. And then the other one is Malachi Corley, the running back turned wide receiver who, I mean, you get the ball in this guy's hands early and he truly turns into a running back. Yeah, I mean, some wide receivers have high yak scores because you get the ball in their hands in space and they can kind of make you miss and they can run away from people. Malachi Corley has a high yards after catch average because he will run over people. He genuinely becomes a running back again when he gets the ball in his hands, and that balance, taking on contact, staying up, getting those yards after contact as well. Like that's in his wheelhouse for his bread and butter. So those three receivers I really like from a toughness perspective that I don't think is super prevalent in that wide receiver room right now. That would be a great like identity to bring to that team.
And one of the things we've talked about the most, everyone wants to talk about the offensive line as far as why the Chargers' run game struggled, right? But one of the things that let them down the most last year over and over again was the blocking from their tight ends and the blocking from their wide receivers too. So, if Greg Roman has a say in it, he's going to want some guys that can go out there and block as well as being great receivers. But Malachi Corley, I mean, that Louisiana Tech game, man, I mean, just if you watch that game and you want to get excited about a prospect, watch that game, and it's going to, I think, 329-plus yard touchdowns. He was an absolute monster and just, levels people along the way. He's a different kind of yak monster than some of the other guys that you see who are more finesse. So let's get you out on this. The Chargers brought in two former Ravens running backs in free agency, and Gus Edwards and now J.K. Dobbins, as we just saw, to revamp their rushing attack, and that has been the mantra throughout the offseason. Improve the running game, give Justin Herbert a running game. The running game was bad. Now it's going to be good, all of these things. And we are hoping that they wait until day 3 to address it now, right? You never know. They could go Blake Corum and just go totally off the board and take him in round 2. Maybe take him in round 3 just because that's Jim Harbaugh's guy. And the fit would work as well. But if you're thinking about day 3 running backs in this kind of fantasy land where the Chargers can still get someone that kind of fits what they want to do, or even just a good complement, right? A good receiving back, or just someone that can pound the rock in between the tackles and fit that Greg Roman style of offense. Who are your favorite kind of day 3 running backs that you think the Chargers could try to target?
Sure. Yeah, I think that it kind of comes down to those two different categories, right? Whichever one they want to gravitate towards. If they want more of a third down receiving type of back, Tyrone Tracy Jr. from Purdue and Blake Watson from Memphis. Both of these guys started their careers in college football as wide receivers, and they have since turned into running backs out of the backfield. But really good hands, obviously really good routes, know how to set up defenders. And often you're going up against linebackers and safeties when you're a running back out of the backfield, and they just know how to cook those players. They're just not as good in coverage. And I think both of them have really good playmaking ability, a natural, like make you miss type of a style that I think a lot of people would love. The last guy that I throw out there is Will Shipley as well. Shipley doesn't really have the strength in his game that I think Harbaugh is going to want. And so I hesitate with him, but a guy with soft hands out of the backfield, a guy who'll be a nice receiver for you. But then there are some players who, if you want somebody to really like lower the shoulder and, be a really good yards after contact player for you, I think Audric Estime is one of those guys that you could gravitate towards with a much bigger body. And okay, he won't be a home run hitter for you, but he's got some plus wiggle to him for a bigger back. So I think that Harbaugh would like him. And then sort of my sleeper here for the Chargers at the running back position is Cody Schrader from Missouri. Now, he's not that much of a sleeper because he led the SEC in rushing this past year, but he started his career. He was a 0-star recruit, was at Truman State University, didn't really play his first 2 years, got a little bit of action his third year. Fourth year there, he led the FBS in rushing yards, ends up transferring just to be a walk-on at Missouri in 2022, plays kind of sparingly in a running back by committee setup, and then this past year got the full-time load, and you saw what happened. He led the country in rushing, and the reason why he did is because of his rushing style. He will give you every ounce of effort he has in every single carry. He's not going to be the guy who's just going to be like the shiftiest Bijan Robinson type of make you miss in a phone booth type of a player. He's a little bit smaller in size, but he will give you everything he has. And I think Harbaugh is going to love that kind of a player on day 3.
And that's why you bring someone like Trevor Sikkema on so he can tell you about that, because he wasn't really on my radar as an option for the Chargers. So I can't wait to watch him, and I can't wait to see what happens because the Chargers are in such a pivotal spot in this upcoming draft, and it feels like it's going to be a draft for the ages. It feels like a lot can happen. Will it be the first ever 4 quarterbacks in a row taken in a draft, right? There's so many great things that are going to happen, but thank you to Trevor Sikkema for coming on the show again. He's the PFF lead draft analyst, and he's also the co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. He also has the best mock draft simulator that's out there, and I know it's his baby, and so I want to, kind of shout that out again. What do you got going on, Trevor? Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, all the stuff over at PFF.com. Kind of final stretch here with the draft coming up in a couple of days, and I'm literally looking forward to it. I will have my final predictive, what I think your team is going to do mock draft out in the middle of the week. We'll have that Wednesday night as we get ready for Thursday, and I just can't wait for it. It's going to be some fun stuff.
That's so awesome, man. Hey, thank you for coming back on the Locked On Podcast Network, getting back to your roots a little bit. Hey, hopefully we can make this a yearly occurrence because you absolutely crushed it for us, and we really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, guys. Of course, anytime.
Another special thank you to Trevor Sikkema, one of the best in the business. Can't wait to get him on again. And to make sure you don't miss any other shows with big guests like Trevor, make sure to go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. Listen wherever you get your podcast from, including tomorrow, because tomorrow we start our final Chargers 7-round mock draft, going over 2 days, getting into how we can maximize the first couple of days of the draft and then find some sleepers later on that can make a big impact in this team before we get to Thursday when we're making our final predictions on how the Chargers first round will go, because I think we all know it could get a little crazy. But to make sure you guys don't miss it, you can also find the show every day on our social media. You can go on Twitter at LockedOnLAC, me at Dan Talk Sports, and David at Dro Talk SD, as well as our Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. So make sure you guys back here tomorrow for the start of the 7-round Chargers mock draft, the final one. But until then, take it easy and go Bulls.